The Victorian Liberal Party need to learn how to fight like a girl. Specifically, a girl like Moira Deeming. For at least the last 20 years, the Liberal Party of Victoria has existed not to make a positive difference in the world, but simply as a vehicle for ambitious cowards to achieve their selfish objectives. The list of Victorian Liberal Party failures is long and growing fast. Failures in the sense both of events and people. And John Pursuto, the current temporary driver of this slow-motion train wreck, seems determined to learn all the wrong lessons from the worst of the failures who have gone before him. But before we talk about the present catastrophe, we need to go back in history a little bit. In early 1999, Victoria had Premier Jeff Kennett, a controversial but overall very popular Premier, who had dragged the state, sometimes kicking and screaming, out of the 1980s and into the modern world. He was facing his third election as Premier and was universally expected to win. He didn't. And since that shock loss 24 years ago, the Liberal Party of Victoria have won only one single solitary state election. And they won it, thanks in part, and believe it or not, to me. Let me explain. I mentioned it briefly in my editorial last week, and of course my haters, predictably, came out of the woodwork, having absolutely no idea what I was talking about and even less what they were talking about, and called me an egotist and a liar. So let me explain how little old me, the forklift-driving part-time YouTube political commentator that I was back then, is the reason why the Liberal Party of Victoria have their only electoral victory of the 21st century. It's embarrassing. It's the only one. The Liberals won because they picked up a few surprise seats, which combined to carry them to victory by a single seat. One of those unexpected seats was the seat of Seymour, which the Liberal Party won off the back of preferences from a candidate, an independent candidate, named Jan Beer, who ran on a plug-the-pipe platform opposed to the north-south pipeline that was under construction at the time. I worked with Jan in the lead-up to the election to create a video all about the pipe, which Jan used extensively as a weapon during her election campaign. My video attracted tens of thousands of views on YouTube, and remember, we're talking 2010 here. Plus, Jan distributed it widely on DVD because, well, lots of people didn't have fast enough internet to watch YouTube. This was, again, 2010 in country Victoria. Those DVDs got passed around and, in the end, Jan picked up over 10% of the vote in her electorate. And well done to her and everyone that worked with her. As a result of her 3,738 votes going to the Liberal Party candidate and a preference deal, the Liberals won that seat by just 898 votes. And so it was that the Liberal Party of Victoria's Ted Baillieu won the 2010 election by a single seat. And that seat by less than 1,000 votes. And those 1,000 votes because of preferences from Jan Beer. And she won her votes, in part, thanks to my video. Now, I'm not saying that to pump up my tyres and pretend that I'm a somebody, quite the opposite. I'm saying this to emphasise just how lost the Liberal Party of Victoria really are. If the Liberal Party of Victoria are so useless, so flaccid, so lost, that the only election they've won in this millennium required my help, someone who has not succeeded in any other political endeavour before or since. My help got them over. They are truly, truly lost. The last time the Victorian Liberal Party won an election in their own right without my help was in 1996. Let that sink in. And when they did luck their way into that election win in 2010, all it did was lay bare their cowardice and naked ambition for all to see. Ted Baillieu immediately went back on key election promises like the promise to publicly release multi-billion-dollar public-private partnership contracts so that taxpayers could actually see what it was that we were funding. That promise was broken almost immediately, and that set the tone for a lot of other things going forward. Ted Baillieu and I actually have a lot of mutual friends and acquaintances, and I used to ask these friends before the election, before the 2010 election, where Ted became Premier, I was asking these friends, what's Ted like? Is he going to be any good as a Premier? After all, I was committed to seeing the end of the Brumby government after years of terrible mismanagement and of the water supply by Bracks and Brumby, as well as mismanagement of all sorts of other things. But I wanted to know, if I'm helping this Ted Baillieu guy, then is he going to be any good? So I asked that question 4 or 5 times on separate occasions with different mutual acquaintances, none of whom heard each other's answers. This is important. It was weird. I kept getting almost exactly the same response. It went like this. I would ask, what do you think of 10? Is he going to be a good Premier? And they would say, and I'm not making this up, I have to emphasise this, they all did this. They would say, he's a nice guy. Their voices would go high-pitched. They'd look up at the sky. They would damn him with faint praise. Nice guy? What does that even mean? And is that something you want in a Premier? Well, in practice, nice guy meant that he lacked any real spine. He stood for nothing. And he was quickly swept aside by Denis Napthine, who went on to fail just as spectacularly as a Premier and was rightly booted out at the next election in favour of none other than Daniel Andrews. Victoria has been stuck with Daniel Andrews ever since, and the consequences of that are obvious for all to see. Daniel Andrews was made possible almost entirely by the abject failure of the Victorian Liberal Party. They are, with only a handful of exceptions, egotistical cowards, convinced of their own greatness and worthiness to rule, but lacking the spine and courage to actually stand for anything when any sort of pressure is applied. They don't know how to fight. But worse, they've forgotten what's worth fighting for. And that's why I say that they need to fight like a girl. Fight like Moira Deeming, because she knows what she's fighting for. The Liberal Party of Victoria is so far gone that they've just torn themselves apart in a mad rush to expel the one principled politician who could have actually led them, shown them the way out of the wilderness and back into an election-winning position. But to accept that truth would require them to put aside their own egos, their own ambitions, and worse, it would require them to find some courage and the strength to actually stand for something. And most of them, they just don't have it in them. For many, if not most, of the Victorian Liberal Party members, the expulsion of Moira Deeming is going to be the last straw, and it should be. This party has not won an election in their own right without my help in 27 years since 1996, and they're now so desperate to win that they've abandoned any and all of their principles in the vain pursuit of some imaginary political centre that always somehow seems to elude them. The truth is, of course, that no one votes for the centre. We vote for a purpose, for a principle, and a party without a clear purpose has already lost. By expelling Moira Deeming, the Liberal Party of Victoria have shown that the only people they're willing to fight are the ones who challenge their fragile egos and expose their cowardice. If they'd shown even half as much fight against Daniel Andrews as what they've shown against an elected MP in their own party, then they might not be stranded in the wilderness. But here we are. I said last week that Victoria has become a one-party state, and I stand by that. I said that it's Daniel Andrews who's destroying Victoria, and again, I stand by that. But this week I want to add that it's the Victorian Liberal Party who made Daniel Andrews possible, even inevitable in some senses. And if they can't set their egos and sense of entitlement to one side and actually start appointing leaders with courage and backbone and fight, then they will forever be lost. Those in leadership need to start by apologising to Moira Deeming and then start paying attention to her. They need to learn how to fight like a girl. News is next.